everyone, and welcome to CrohnsCast Live. Tonight we're sitting down with Eleanor, aka Michelle12, and we're going to be chatting about her journey with IBD with a little bit of a focus on women's health. So without further ado, let's get Eleanor into the room. Hi Eleanor, I just want to say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone, hope everyone's good. Saturday night, cup of tea.
We're going crazy, aren't we? We're going wild tonight. I've got my cup of tea, some water on the side, ready to go.
Yep.
Living the dream.
Yep. Been way too long since I've been out on a night out, so you know this is how we roll now. It's all good.
So Eleanor, if you don't mind just kicking us off, do you want to start with how old were you when you were diagnosed?
So actually I was really late on for being diagnosed with IBD. I was 38. I'm 41 now, so it was only sort of nearly 3 years back. So I think normally you kind of get it diagnosed up to the 20s, like 20s kind of being the latest. So I was super late. Yeah, it was, and it came on very quickly, and it was diagnosed luckily very quickly, and it was all sorted very quickly. So I've kind of been quite lucky with my journey.
So what was life like prior to your diagnosis? Like, did you have a reasonably normal time up to that point?
Yeah, up to my late 30s, I was kind of doing everything you do, traveling, working full time, living on my own. Sports, Pilates I was into, I was doing running, swimming, like it was just a pretty normal life really, going out, seeing friends, just everything you do when you're that kind of age. So it was a massive shock when it hit, because it just kind of then just stops everything in its tracks, and then you have to kind of just sort things out. But yeah, up until that point I'd had no health problems at all, so yeah, it was a bit of a shock.
Okay, so what age did you start to get symptoms, or when did you start having symptoms, and what was that like?
So it was 2016, it was December, and I just remember being at work and I had a bit of a jippy tummy, and I just thought I'd eaten something funny, and all I had, to be honest, for 3 weeks was a bit of diarrhea, a bit of blood in it, not a lot at all, not enough to sort of scare me, but enough to make me go to the doctor. So over that December I did have a bit of trouble at the beginning. I saw about 9 GPs who kept fobbing me off with, you've got hemorrhoids, you've got gastro. They didn't do any tests or anything. So I ended up just begging for a colonoscopy at the end of it, because I was really worried about colon cancer. That was obviously my big concern. So that was December. The flare lasted just for December. It finished on New Year's Day, which was really weird, and everything kind of went back to normal. Bowel movements went back to normal. The only thing I still had was every now and again like traces of blood and mucus, but not a lot, and I had no pain, like at any point. I didn't have any abdominal pain, so I wasn't really worried at this point. I finally got my colonoscopy in March of 2017, when they diagnosed mild colitis, is what I was told. No cancer, obviously that was the bit I was looking for, but they didn't put me on any meds. And I found out later down the line that I should have been put on steroids, or just some kind of sort of light medication at that point, just to keep it at bay, but I was signed off. And then for 2017 I was pretty much okay. Bowel movements were kind of normal, no pain, whatever. And then at the end of the year, almost a year to the day after my very first ever symptom, I had a massive acute flare and ended up in hospital.
Wow, that is another roller coaster ride and a half.
Yeah, it just came on super quickly, and I think that flare I tried to manage at home because I had with the first one, but it became much worse, much quicker. I had a lot of pain with that one. I was being sick, and then very soon it was literally just blood. There was nothing else there. It was just, and I then started feeling faint, and when the vomiting started, and I got up one morning, and this is the bit that always kicked me, is like I went to the loo, but I'd already gone and I didn't know. So that scared me. So I just took myself off to hospital, and luckily St George's in South London was literally a 4-minute walk from my door, so I think adrenaline got me there. And I walked in, sat down, and the triage doctor just came over, took one look at my colour, took my blood pressure, and I was straight into resus. So I had super low blood pressure. They were really worried about, I think, my heart at that point, so I was put on monitors straight away. I had a drip in each arm. They were pumping like fluids and stuff into me while they were trying to work out what was wrong. My inflammatory markers were through the roof. I think they were in like the 700s when I went in. So yeah, it was all panic stations and loads of doctors and nurses and people around me. So then I was just admitted, and we all kind of went from there.
I mean, that's crazy. And it's just, what amazes me again is just like yet another person where it's literally gone from boom to bust within such a short space of time. When did they start discussing surgery and things with yourself? Was that within this time, or was it later on?
Yeah, I mean, it was because it was so sudden, and it was so bad so suddenly. I was admitted on that evening, and then for 2 weeks they tried to get it under control with steroids, which apparently are supposed, if they don't work within 72 hours, they don't tend to work if it's that acute a flare. So they started those. I had 4 injections a day, 4 infusions a day with the steroids, and then they also put me on cyclosporin, which is a bad boy colitis drug. I was being seen every day by my IBD consultant. They brought in a surgeon really near the beginning, actually. I think it was on day 2 when I had a flexi sig on the second day I was in, to confirm that the colitis was bad. I mean, he put the scope in and then kind of looked at me and went, "Oh dear." And I was like, "Oh, that's great, thanks." So we knew it was bad at that point. So the surgeon came down and said, "Look, you'll probably never see me again, but I need to tell you that I would be your surgeon if anything was necessary." So we carried on for 2 weeks. I kept having bloods, nothing was changing. The Bristol stool chart was nowhere near what it should be. I was in a lot of pain. By this stage, I was kind of 30 to 40 times over a 24-hour period going to the toilet. Through the night, it was even worse. I was up sort of every half hour with cramps, making me vomit as well. The pain was so bad. So eventually, I think 2 weeks in, my surgeon said, well, actually, it was my IBD consultant, one of the lovely ones, one of the good bedside manner ones, that came round and said, I did have one that was very technical. He was like, "This is what's going on with you." And he knew his stuff, but there was no empathy there. And it's kind of, when you're being told something frightening, you need something. So the nice back, and he just said, "Look, we've just had our multidisciplinary meeting. I tried really hard to save your colon, but it just is too dangerous." And then I spoke to my surgeon, and she explained that it just needed to be done, and it was over Christmas, so we needed to plan and get it in so that we didn't risk a bowel perforation. And so it was nice because it was planned, and I had a couple of days to get used to it, which I think was more than enough, because I think I'd have panicked if I'd been given any longer. But by that point, I was like, "Get it out, just get it out. I don't want it." It was so bad. I was just like, "I don't care. I know it means a stoma, and I just don't care." But I had done, up to this point, I had done no research on stomas or what it meant to live with them. I hadn't been and looked for support groups online because I genuinely didn't think it would end up happening. So in those 48 hours, I was just kind of with my family and friends, just trying to wrap my head around it and trying to prepare for major surgery when I'd never been ill a day in my life beyond like your normal getting ill. So it was pretty scary. But yeah, so after 2 weeks in hospital, I had the surgery, and then I was in for another 2 weeks getting used to it because my electrolytes went crazy and they were trying to get my potassium up. And just getting used to having a stoma, getting, trained on how to sort of deal with it, getting strength back to be able to go home and look after things. So it was a month in hospital, and then life changed forever. So yeah, it was pretty.
Yeah, as quick as that, it was gone. So given the quick nature in which you were thrust into, right, you're now going to have life-altering surgery, and by the way, you're going to have a bag hanging off your abdomen. Obviously, you probably didn't have time, like you mentioned, to actually grasp what this meant. So what were your initial feelings in having an ostomy? When you started to come out of that fog of surgery, so to speak.
I think my first feeling was, everyone had said to me before surgery, all the doctors had said, when you wake up, A, you'll feel like you've had the best sleep ever, and B, you'll just immediately feel 100 times better. And I just had no idea what they meant until I woke up, and both those things were true. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't, cramping. Everything was just, I don't know. I felt like euphoric when I came around, if I'm honest. I mean, I was drugged, but it was great. And I think I looked down immediately because I wanted to see it straight away. I was in HDU for 24 hours and then moved to a ward. So on HDU, I did look at it because I was like, I can't not, I need to know what's going on. But it was in one of those massive surgical stoma bags, the big see-through ones that are like,
the
and
really attractive ones.
Yeah, so I freaked out because I thought that was what the bag was going to look like. I was like, oh, this comes down to my knees. So yeah, I got a little bit scared then, and then the guy in HD said, no, that's just the surgery one, so we can see that everything's working. And I was like, okay, fine. So actually, weirdly, I never, having been marked up for it before with the stoma nurses and having them answered questions and all that kind of thing, I think when I woke up, I don't know, I didn't feel the fear. I didn't have that. I knew it, I was a bit like, oh, okay, so this is going to be a life changer. I'm going to have to get used to something, but it was never in a negative way. I was just relieved that it was gone. Honestly, I don't regret anything, and I'd do it again. So yeah, I actually felt all right, apart from, I don't even remember ever being in pain, really. And I know that you get given painkillers, but my Barbie butt surgery, pain afterwards. This one, nothing. I don't remember it at all. So I just kind of was quite excited to sort of have it fixed and then just get used to kind of dealing with it, managing it, getting back home. That was my big focus, just getting out of hospital and just getting back to life, because I thought, at least now I don't have to worry about flares. I don't have to worry about medication. I don't have to worry about all the long-term stuff that other people like manage the condition with who don't have a stoma. So actually, I don't know, I was kind of relieved, I think, more than anything else.
So were you diagnosed with ulcerative colitis? Yeah, that's what
So I think they did a biopsy of my colon afterwards, because apparently the bit that's right round the other end was mostly okay. It was the ascending, descending colon bit that was really, really wrecked. And because I was worried about it being Crohn's, I've got a lot of friends who had indeterminate. So they were worried it might be that, so Crohn's might come along later. It still might, you never know. But they did the biopsy and it was definitely sort of that end. So it was definitely ulcerative colitis, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a positive to come out of it, at least. So was there any discussion for you then on further surgery, like J-pouch or things like that? And what was the decision process you went through?
Yeah, I think initially I was always told that there was the possibility to reverse. And I think in my head before the surgery and potentially straight afterwards, I thought, fine, I only have to have this for 6 months. Then I can get rid of it. And not because I didn't like it, but there was an option to, if I wanted to, have normal function back, not normal function, but as in normal method of going to the toilet back. So I had in the back of my head that I had been told that I was a good candidate for it because I didn't have any sign of Crohn's. The rest of my abdomen was very healthy. I didn't have any other linked issues, because like a lot of people with IBD long term have things like arthritis or other issues going on, but because I didn't have it for very long, I didn't have any of that. So my surgeon did say, you're a really good candidate for it if you want it, but go away, research it and really find out whether you want it or not. And I think I looked into it. I spoke to a lot of people who have had J pouches, who have stayed with a permanent ostomy. I spoke to surgeons. I spoke to stoma nurses. I spoke to my IBD consultant. I did a lot of talking to actual real life people who live with them online. And I think for me, it was just, if I was younger, if I was in my 20s, I think I probably would have given it a go. But because I'm not, I just kind of think I don't want to put myself through another couple of major surgeries, potentially then if the J pouch fails, having to have a stoma anyway at the end of it. And I just think I have a really good functioning stoma. Like, it's low output. She's very well behaved. I've not had any issues at all. So I kind of think if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. So I kind of came round to very quickly, within about 5 months, I was like, nah, I'm not doing it. I'm going to have the Barbie butt surgery because I don't have to plan my life around a toilet. That was a big one because I have health related anxiety. So before my surgery, I used to panic about going anywhere. Like if I was going to see a friend on the train somewhere out of London, or even just going to work, I'd be in my head going, right, which tube stations have got toilets I can get out at? And I'd have to spend my entire life doing that. And I hated it. It used to just make me feel horrible. So I just thought, with a bag, never have to do that. And, everything's nice and contained. Can never be blamed for the fart in the room. All these things that come with having a bag. It's just like, and I just think, I was getting on really well with her. So it was just, I accepted it quite quickly. And I actually kind of enjoyed it after a while. I can't weirdly remember what life was like without her now. It's just it's became normal so fast. And I did have some healing issues afterwards. I had a bit of separation because of the steroids, but that healed within about 6 months, and it wasn't painful or hard to deal with. But the decision for me after speaking to a lot of people was really easy. And my surgeon said to me that, you know, in that situation she probably would have done the same thing, because it's just nice not to have to worry. It's just, and have to worry about another flare happening or having to manage my diet. I love being able to eat everything. Like beforehand, things would kick it off and make it flare and make my tummy hurt and stuff. So it's just nice to be able to eat whatever I want, and that would have not been possible had I gone back and done the reversal. So yeah, I mean, I think I've definitely made the right choice, and again, it's a surgery I'd do again. So
no, for sure. So you mentioned a lot of things there, and one of the things I wanted to chat about was like, what has this whole process taught you about yourself?
that's such a hard question. I think it's taught me that I am way stronger than I thought I was, that I can deal with stuff like this, because this is a hit. I mean, this is when you get told you have to have your entire colon removed and you have to change the way your body functions. It's huge. And I remember telling so many friends and family and seeing their faces, and I was like, oh, this is quite a big deal. But to me, I was just like, this is going to save my life, so just get on with it. But I think I don't know, it's taught me not to take anything for granted, and it's taught me that I am and can be massively independent, which can be a good or a bad thing. But I think I just like myself more now than I did. And it's also taught me that I definitely had all of my coming through this rooted in faith as well, because I'm a Christian and I was before, but I think this whole situation really strengthened that for me. So that's kind of made that area of my life like a lot better too. So I just think, yeah, it's taught me quite a lot. I'm definitely a better person than I was before. And I think it just, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be, I think, is just what we do. I mean, you've been there obviously with this kind of illness, so it's like you just do what you have to do to survive and get through it. And other people are like, oh, you're so strong. It's like, I'm not, I'm just surviving, I'm just doing what I need to do. But when you look back on it afterwards, you're like, well, actually, yeah, that's quite a lot of strength going into something so huge and having such a massive life-changing operation. And it's not just the operation, it's everything afterwards. Like, life is not the same. It's better for me, but it's not the same. So it is a big adjustment. And it really makes me sad that there are so many people out there who don't and can't accept their stomas. Like, mentally speaking, they just can't get their heads around it. And I've spoken to quite a lot of people through advocacy work, through my old stoma nurses, and it's just heartbreaking. Even though it's saving their lives and making things better, it's the physical kind of aesthetic that they just can't get their head around. So I don't know, it's different for different people, but I think I definitely found me a lot more after this whole process. And I think, yeah, I definitely think I'm living a better life now, which sounds weird so late on, but yeah, definitely.
I know it's one of those things. I believe that whenever you approach it from the way you've talked about it, it's, you almost perceive life as it's giving you a second chance. You've got a second inning, so to speak.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting is your talk about faith, and I was wondering if you could elaborate. Like, what is it do you feel has maybe pushed you to reaffirm your faith, or built that side of your life up?
I think I actually became a Christian quite late in life. I mean, my family have always been, we went to church as kids, mum and dad are Christians. But when we became teenagers, they kind of let us find our own path. And I didn't become a Christian until I was, 2013. So however old I was then. And I think I did come back to faith at that point, but I don't think that it was really cemented for me until this happened, because as a Christian, you kind of you trust that God has a path for you. And obviously when something like this happens, you understandably, a lot of people will be like, well, if there's a God, why are you letting this happen to me? It's just a lot of questioning, and a lot of people will actually go the other way and turn away from their faith. And I know a lot of people who have, and I didn't want that to happen, because I had to deal with quite a lot of it on my own. I had a really good friend who was with me in hospital every single day, but as in, you know, if my parents were abroad at the time, they came back from my surgery, the actual surgery day, but they were abroad for most of it. So I was kind of mentally dealing with a lot of it on my own. And I think it was really weird, because it was the hospital chaplain that came round to speak to somebody opposite me when I was in, who then came over and sat on the end of my bed and had a chat. And she just sort of looked at me and she went, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" And I was like, "How do you know that?" And she said, "I don't know, just do." And she sort of sat with me, and then she would come around and pray with me after this lady every day. And it was just nice, because then I had that in common with her as well. So we did a lot of talking together, and I just think it kind of made me just realize, I think that's probably why I accepted it so quickly and so well, because I just thought, well, you know what, this is the plan, and there's a reason that this is happening, so let's just go with it, do what we can, and just trust that this is the way it's supposed to be. So for me, leaning on my faith was huge. So yeah, it was a big part of it.
So what is it you think about, because you mentioned a number of things there, like leaning on your faith being one, and trusting in a process that this is meant to be. I'm just wondering, like, what is your perception of that? Is it something bigger than self, or is it something else?
I think I think, well, I suppose it's a bit of both, because obviously, like, what every Christian will say, that they, you know, God has a plan for them, and it's not like you just sit back and let things roll. I mean, you have an active part in that plan because you have an active faith, but I think you can't sit here and just say that everything bad that happens means that there's not a God. I think that's kind of, for me, that was where I kind of wobbled at the beginning and then didn't, because it's just, I just kind of feel like everything's mapped out, and I just think these things all like, my cat recently died, just as an example, and I just kind of used to think, well, I've been single for 10 years, like, so I'm already single, you've taken away both my cats, and now you've given me a stoma bag. Seriously, what more do you want to do? So I was kind of, you know, why is this all happening to me? Like, my siblings are all healthy, none of their cats have died, and it was just kind of, you know, I just thought, how, I think at one point I was kind of like, am I being punished for something here? But then no, it was just kind of like, these are all things that kind of shape you and are taking you towards an end goal. And it's got to a point where now I've met a really amazing guy who I've been with for a couple of months, and he's incredible. He's like accepted Rosie immediately. It's like, it's not even a thing. She's part of our relationship, and it's just really nice. So I kind of think that all the stuff that has happened has led to certain points where good things happen. So I think that's like, it kind of balances out, and I quite like that. So, and it's proved kind of right in this situation. So, you know, kind of
just for those who might not be totally familiar with yourself, like, who's Rosie?
Oh, Rosie's my stoma. Yeah, sorry.
That's amazing, isn't it? It's really important, that aspect.
Yeah, I named my stoma. I definitely think if you name them, it helps you to accept them mentally. So I named her before she was even created. Well, my ward friend did, actually. But yeah, so she kind of has her own little personality. She's quite gobby. And yeah, so it's kind of treated as like a separate entity. It's very strange. So she gets referred to by everyone I know as her own thing. So it just kind of makes it a bit more fun to deal with. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. One of the things that you were talking about just then, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. The sort of acceptance piece. How important was that for you?
Accepting the stoma we're talking about.
No, for within an external relationship.
Oh, massive. I mean, so yeah, the whole dating scene is like a minefield with a stoma. I think I have been single for a very long time. I'm very independent. Wasn't really bothered about being in a relationship. I was just kind of like, you know what, I'm quite happy on my own. I'm very self-sufficient. And I went on a few dates after, and for me it was almost like a bit of a social experiment, because I was like, what would happen when I tell them about this? Because from looking at me and from talking to me, you would have no idea. And for me, obviously, anyone I'm going to be with has got to be completely accepting, because you know, it's part of me and it's going to stay. I knew at that point I was not reversing. So I went on a few dates, and when it went to a second date, everything was fine. They were super keen. Got to a second date. The second I said anything about Rosie, the atmosphere just changed. It wasn't mean. They weren't sort of like get up and leave, but it was definitely a nah. And then got ghosted. So it's like, it wasn't even oh, that's not for me. So I think that I know it's very hard for some people to accept. It's a big deal. I mean, it's physically speaking, as well as dealing with somebody with a chronic illness, or like being with somebody, that's not the right word, being with somebody with a chronic illness it can be difficult. It's going to be challenging. But you need the right person by your side, because that support is going to be ongoing, it's lifelong. So when you find somebody who is ticking those boxes, it's massively important. It's huge, and I don't think there are very many of them out there.
Yeah, it's such a, like, you know, to put yourself out there and to get ghosted and things like that, it's not a very enjoyable experience. And I guess, like, how does that make it's going to sound awkward, and I don't want to be making it
No, go for it.
negative, but how did that make you feel about yourself? Was there elements where you blamed yourself, or were you able to rise above it and see what it was?
The weird thing for me is I am so unbothered by what other people think, and I'm really confident. I think I actually bizarrely had more self-confidence after my stoma than I did before. And so for me, right from the word go, it was love me, love my stoma. Or so when they did it to me, didn't really bother me, because immediately I was like, well, you're not worth being with. I don't want you in my life if that's what you're going to do, and not even politely say something. But I think for other people who to put themselves out there would be a massive deal, that could be a confidence killer. That could really affect somebody who wasn't quite as, you know, okay with it as I am. And I think that's what really upset me about it, and what made me get into advocacy, because I was like, I wouldn't want anyone to feel like that ever. And I didn't, but I could see how it would completely tear somebody down if they'd built themselves up to that and weren't very confident. So it's a minefield. It's horrible, but I think I'm lucky in that I'm quite resilient, and I'm not really fazed by what other people think. So I'm lucky in that respect. But it could be completely the other way for somebody who wasn't as confident, and that's why I love helping people and speaking to them about, you know, coming to terms with acceptance and that kind of thing, because this stuff will happen all the time, relationships or not. So you'll get people who are idiots about it and who will say things that are stupid and uneducated. I've had that anyway from just other people. So if you don't have the confidence and the sort of balls, so to speak, to bounce back and say something, it can be soul destroying. So yeah.
Well, what would your top 3 tips, sort of like from an advocacy perspective, someone who is having to deal with rejection potentially for the first time, or is concerned about intimacy with an ostomy? What would be your 3 top tips, so to speak, for that?
I think the biggest one is talk to people. It's huge. It's a mental health tip as well. It's everything. Talk to someone. There are so many support groups out there online. There are so many good Facebook groups that have got thousands of people in there who have experienced anything that you could imagine to do with stomas. It might not even be IBD, could be anything. And even if people don't have stomas, they're in there. People with IBD or with bowel cancer, just anything that's kind of even remotely linked. And the support network is huge. I mean, straight after hospital, I met one of my best friends who I'm going to be a bridesmaid for next October, like Sophie. She's my bag wife. So we've got such a good relationship, and she's helped me through basically pretty much all of the process that I've been through, because she is like a fountain of knowledge on it. But she helps other people as well in that way. So I'd say definitely talk, like make sure you connect with somebody. And actually, if you're not happy actually talking to somebody online, it's a really, really great way to go about it. And there's lots of like the actual the people who deliver my supplies have a support line as well. So Amcare deliver my supplies, and if you want to talk about anything, they've got a little support line going on, so you can ring people up. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely try where possible. It's not possible for everybody, but try to kind of live your life as similarly as you did before, as in sort of day-to-day routine, because that kind of helps you mentally get back into a place where you were before. And it's like things will be different for some people, but you can kind of adapt around it. But if you try and keep to sort of what you were doing, that really helps. And just surround yourself by good people. I mean, I've lost friends that I thought were really good friends since my surgery, but I've also gained friends that I either never met or were just kind of acquaintances before. So you really learn a lot about the people that you want around you. So just surround yourself with good people and you'll be fine. The support is the massive thing. The support is the key thing here.
I think that's so true as well. Like what we were just talking about before about it being a second chance life, just making the most of it and doing that by surrounding yourself with people that sort of matter and do care, rather than
Yeah.
people that perhaps are negative or bring a sort of, I mean, I'm not saying that people can't have a negative opinion. I mean, obviously sometimes having a balance of opinions is always a good idea, but
Yeah.
someone
I
who's always just there trying to bring you down is never
That's the
useful.
thing. I think the key is positivity. You need people who are going to build you up and really support you. I mean, even just the 4 weeks, sorry, I was in hospital. My best friend lived down the road and she came in every single night. Doesn't matter what she'd been doing at work, she was having a horrific time at work. So I say, thanks, Laura. She came in every night without fail. She was washing clothes for me. She was bringing in food because the hospital food was disgusting. She was recharging her iPad for me. She was just incredible. So you need people like that. And because anyone is, I mean, I've had other friends as well who quite recently actually literally kind of pulled the face when talking about stomas and bags and pooing in a bag, like pulled that face, the face that makes you feel dirty. And I was like, wow, that's the first time I think I've ever been made to feel like ugh about having a stoma ever. And it was horrible. And it's the only time it's happened. But yeah, I mean, you just don't need that in your life. It's like, no, surround yourself with people who love you.
I think I did used to make a bit of a game of mine actually whenever I had my stoma, to actually just try and make people feel a little bit squeamish. But I think that's just the sadistic side of me.
Yeah, I've done that too, kind of.
So one of the focuses for tonight is to talk a bit more about sort of women's health side of things. And we had a really interesting chat last week, talking about pregnancy and things like that. And I just wonder what's your experience been with relationship to the health side of your womanhood and having IBD and having an ostomy?
I think I think this is a very, very different area for a lot of people. I've spoken to quite a few people about this actually, because one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is about what relationships and stuff will be like after a stoma, and like, does that mean I'm not going to be able to have sex? Does that mean I'm not going to be able to do anything? And I think it very much depends on your surgery, because with me, I know that I don't want children, so I had my second surgery done with that in mind. But with a lot of women, you have an issue where if you have the rectum removed, the uterus tilts back, which is why they say have kids before you have that done, because it can affect your fertility. And it also makes carrying kids a little bit more difficult if everything inside you shifts. So wasn't a big deal for me, but it has made other women's health things a little bit difficult. It's made smear tests a little bit difficult. It's made my cycle a little bit nasty. It's made it more painful. I think that's quite common as well with people who've had this surgery. As far as intimacy goes and relationships not really any different. And intimacy, I think the only thing that it really changes is spontaneity. But again, I think it's very different for a lot of people, because I've spoken to a lot of girls that I know, a lot of women, and some of them will say, for example, certain positions work better, and then somebody else will say exactly the opposite. So I think it very much depends on your body and what's comfortable for you, how you had your surgery, what surgery you had done, what other stuff you've got going on, if you've still got sort of inflammation, or if you've still got sort of abdominal issues or sort of joint issues. It's very, very different. But I think in the main, it doesn't really have to affect it. I mean, you carry on, life is normal, less spontaneity perhaps, but other than that, there's not really been any kind of, I don't think there has to be any kind of difference.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I talk about is compared to what, if you draw a comparison to what your life is, potentially, if surgery is a genuine discussion between yourself and your IBD care team, you're, in comparison to what now are you comparing the future? Because is it any good right now? What can you do right now? And I think like what you mentioned, and certainly the feelings I had post surgery, was that our health and our ability to do it just is increased exponentially, because you can do so little. Whenever it becomes a serious discussion, you are genuinely sick, and actually life is a little bit less worth living at that point. And actually
Yeah.
having that surgery just makes it, in my experience, have made it that much more worthwhile. Sounds a bit crazy and a bit deep to be talking about it in that sort of a
No,
context.
but it does, and I think it's the thing is, you know, it's a massive part of life, isn't it? It's a huge part, especially if you're in a relationship. It's a huge part of your life going forward, and you need to know, you know, how that's going to be affected. But like you say, it's inevitably it's for the better. I mean, with me personally, because everything happened so quickly, I didn't really have those sort of issues beforehand, because I've been single for a long time anyway. It wasn't really a focus for me, because I was single before, I was single for a long time after, so it wasn't immediately in my head that this was going to be a problem, or I wasn't concerned about it. I was just focused on new life, let's get on with the stoma, let's kind of just get past this first, and then we'll speak about the rest later. It only became a focus like when people started asking me, when I started the advocacy work, and I used to get quite a lot of questions about it. So I was just doing research and talking to other women, other men as well, because it's very different for men afterwards. So I mean, I just don't think it's what you make it almost. I mean, there are obvious differences, there are things that you can overcome, but it doesn't mean that that part of your life has to stop. So but it's how you kind of navigate that one. It's different for everyone.
I think one of the interesting things I discovered is actually just how forgiving the opposite sex or the same sex can actually be, or a partner, maybe should we term it as that, can actually be within that sort of context once you've, once you've actually found a decent person who's accepting you for who you are. But yeah, like I can remember actually being, as a bloke, concerned about this extra appendage that's flapping about, and obviously most people watching this are adults, would understand the sort of interaction that a man may have with their partner without discussing it too much. But anyway, having that flapping around was like a bit sort of going, well, how is that going to work? Surely someone's going to notice this like extra appendage slapping on skin in places where you might not want it to slap on skin, and all those kinds of thoughts. And it's a nerve-wracking thought until...
It is, and actually, weirdly as well, with things like that, I don't know about for guys, but for girls, there's definitely things out there that you can buy to help with that. They have intimacy belts, which are just sort of lacy, elastic, very loose elastic, not tight, that you just pop round and it keeps the bag from flapping. There are, and like you say, if you found somebody who is accepting you, it's almost not even a problem, because it doesn't really get noticed. I know that sounds really weird because it's there, but it doesn't really get noticed. It's just kind of you. So it very much means that this is why I think it's super important to have somebody who is fully accepting of it, because that kind of kills half the battle. I mean, the rest of it is kind of just aesthetics, isn't it? It's just kind of, do I want to look like this? Do I want to kind of stop it flapping around? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there now. I mean, the things that you can have as an ostomate to help you just generally are insane, and they're growing all the time. There's so much more out there to help people just sort of keep it tight, you know, gym belts, you know, hernia belts, and underwear for women and men, and clothing, and it's just crazy. So, you know, 50 years ago you weren't getting any of this kind of thing. But yeah, I just think it's half the battle is having someone who understands you and who gets it and who isn't bothered by it, and the other half of the battle is you yourself being happy with it. So I think when you've nailed both, you're done.
Yeah, and definitely, I think the bigger battle is yourself a lot in a lot of cases. I'm still not entirely sure whether my wife's been completely honest with me, but like she didn't notice it for months until, like, I can't remember where we were. I think we were just casually just sitting on the sofa, or we were out somewhere, and she grabbed what she thought was my t-shirt. And sort of I'd grabbed the bag, and not in an aggressive manner, but
just accidental,
But it like pulled the adhesive or the flange just against the skin, not dislodge or anything, but it obviously had pulled on my skin. So rather than the t-shirt move, it was actually like a bit more of a tug, or a bit more resistance. She's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "It's my bag." It's, "What do you mean your bag?" My colostomy bag? It's like,
I love
what?
that.
What? What do you mean colostomy? And then I had to get my colostomy bag out and show her, and she was like all surprised, like, "Oh, I had no idea you had this going on." And I was like, "We've been
Yeah.
we've been dating for like 3 good months. Like, what? How have you not noticed this?" And but to be fair, like it's not like, whenever I'd walk around with a towel on or something, so to speak, like the towel would be above it because it's awkward having the towel below the stoma.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess generally she just it's not something that would naturally have been
I mean,
seen, really.
to be honest with you, I was completely. I had a very. I had discussions over when I started dating. I had discussions over when you tell someone. This seemed
Mm,
to be a very different thing for everyone. There was no one straight rule of fit. So I started off by not putting it on profiles and
mhm.
got a lot more attention than when it was on my profile.
Oh
So
wow.
I put it on my profile and I literally just said, right, I don't know if you've heard of the dating app Hinge. Yeah.
No, I've realized quite recently how naive I am when it comes to apps of a dating nature. I genuinely like my life experience of dating apps is very minimal. Um,
Not a bad thing.
not a bad thing especially from the conversations I've had with other people about them.
Uh,
But like
they're-
the only ones I ever heard of was like Match and Plenty of Fish and eHarmony. I think they're
yeah,
the only ones that I have genuinely ever known.
I think they're still going, but Hinge is relatively new, I guess. But it's got a different way of doing it in that you put your pictures up, but they make you answer questions. So it's things like, if you like blank, we'll get on really well, and you put them on your page, and then And the first one was, one thing you should know about me is, and I just said, I'm an ostomy, I live with a stoma. If that's okay, let's chat. That was the very first question. It was at the top of my profile. You'd be amazed how many people just click through and don't even read it. Because I'd literally have to say to everyone and go, you have checked, you know I have a stoma. And they're like, a what? And I'm like, oh, why? But then Kevin, my boyfriend, like he
Mhm.
said that was one of the things that made him message me.
Yeah.
So he was like, the confidence came out, and he just said that was one of the things that I looked through and just thought she's amazing, and so messaged me, and then it kind of went from there. So I think I personally would put it out there, because when I haven't and then mentioned it, it's kind of gone pear-shaped. But you don't want to risk getting attached to somebody who's then going to turn around and vanish. So my thing would be get it out there straight away. But then other people have successfully waited for a little bit, and then the partner's stuck around. So I think it's a bit of a gamble either way. I think it's what you feel most comfortable doing. But I kind of wanted to be honest out, right up front, and just be like, this is it. This is what you're signing up for. So if you don't want it, you can go. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But I'm not going to carry on dating someone who's kind of in the dark about it, because I would feel a bit, I'd feel like a bit uncomfortable, like I was holding something back that was pretty important. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. Like, I guess with everything, it's a debate, and there's always going to be an opposite to our opinions. But yeah, I would have thought, yeah, being upfront about it would save embarrassment later in a weird way. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess well, anyway, maybe there's that fear of rejection or fear of just not
Absolutely.
being picked.
Absolutely. And that's sadly, that's just a part of life with having an ostomy. I think it's a part of life with any kind of physical disability. I think there is always that risk that you're going to have people out there who will do that. But for me, I think it was more of, because when I was first had my stoma, I had a couple of leaks quite early days when I was trying to sort of find the right product. It didn't go on for very long, but I just thought, if that happened on a date, how am I explaining that? And I was like,
Mm,
I need to kind of be able to be honest and just be kind of like, you know what, this is the situation, I'm gonna have to go home. And I just think if I hadn't said anything, that's like a super awkward thing to try and explain to somebody. So I think from very early on, I was very much of the opinion of, this is me, and it, everything included. And if that doesn't fit with you, then that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying it's not fine, but it's just, let's not waste anyone's time here. So I just didn't want to sort of spend months dating someone for them to then suddenly turn around and go, oh, you know what, I can't deal with that, you should have told me. So I just, yeah, and also because of my age, I mean, making myself sound like I'm 60, but I'm not 20 anymore. So it's like, it's not like I've got years and years of dating ahead of me. So yeah, it was just a personal decision, and I get that other people don't do it and it's worked, and that's fine. But for me, it was just all up front.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, totally. If that's your game, my thought on it is just like, as if I guess it's similar to people that have got kids from a past relationship or things like that. You kind of, I guess, you kind of enter into the dating game going, oh, like I don't want to bring extra baggage to it, so just
Yeah.
ironically because it's a bag. But yeah, the flip of that is like, do you that like when is the right time, and does that then make you like you don't want to tell them now? When do you want to tell them? And then
And that's
and
it.
then
It's
there's,
like, how long do you keep this secret for? How long do you like disguise the fact that you're going to the toilet to empty a bag, or that you have to change a bag, or that you're not going to be seen naked in front of them, or you know, you're kind of hiding away when you get dressed? It's, I don't know. It's, yeah, I think that would be more stressful than just
yeah.
putting it out there.
I mean, that's my thoughts, and it's like any time that there's dishonesty in a relationship, it kind of like it just gets bigger than it needs to be almost, and it's just like the small thing of just saying about it. I just know it's going to sound weird, but knowing my wife's friends has introduced me to a whole like an exponentially wider range of women. And the things that women go through and conversations that women have. And I'm just like, it just
Are you
amazes me
okay?
sometimes. Yeah, I think I'm okay. It makes me feel more sane as a man somehow. But
Love that.
just some of the things that they discuss, some of the things that they decide to withhold, and then spend the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, if the relationship lasts that long, wondering when, or like, for example, like, when do I introduce this person to said friend, or a section of this group of friends? And then like,
Yeah.
it might just be me, but those things never sort of like, they never resonate within my head as a question.
No.
But it's just like, yeah, I guess the more you dwell on it, the more it becomes a sort of bigger issue.
Yeah, and then it becomes a really big thing, and then it becomes a bigger thing than it's supposed to be, which then is just, in my head, that's just kind of like a bomb waiting to go off. It's just, I don't know, I think it would eat me up if I was hiding something that big. And it also kind of would make me feel like I was embarrassed about it, which I'm absolutely not. Everyone who knows me knows I will talk about poo as long as you want me to. Like, I mean, it's not even, it's so desensitized to it now that I'm really passionate about it. So I will talk about this until the day ends. And so I don't really have that issue, but I think I'd never want to be embarrassed about having a stoma, and I think it would make me feel like that if I was hiding it from somebody. So
Like, yeah, I mean, my mate, he comes on here semi-regularly, John. Like, me and him regularly just sit down or get on the phone. We have a good old poo chat, which is, and
yeah,
it's ironic. Without, I'm gonna have to curse anyway, because like the guys that come in and work, oh, you having your shit chat, you and your shit chat, and obviously shit chat meaning you've got crap chat, but actually we're genuinely talking about shit.
yeah. And actually, do you know what another good thing about being a stoma owner is? Have you ever played Cards Against Humanity?
Yes.
So you know that the person who goes first is the person who had a poo last, which means you always get to go first. Like, win-win. But no, I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't think I don't think there's a single day when it doesn't get talked about in some context, whether it's accidents, whether it's, you know, funny bag stories, which I find hilarious. I find bag mishaps hilarious. I know some people are mortified by them, but I just find them really funny. I think you got to laugh or you'll cry. But yeah, every day. I think if you desensitize to this, it's such a big deal. Actually, it's a huge deal. And I think if you can not laugh about it, but if you can kind of be on that level with yourself, then you kind of, it shows and it makes other people relax around you. And I just think that's super important when you're dealing with something that is so big, that you need to kind of try and be relaxed about it. And just, that's why the acceptance thing for me is huge. And it's so upsetting when people just really can't. And it's horrible. So
I think one of the things that helped me was I tended to talk about it first. So
yeah,
it'd be something. I think people might just thought I was a bit weird at the time, because I would genuinely, that almost would be my opening gambit. No, yeah, I've got a stoma. Oh,
yeah.
I'm probably going to make a loud noise in a few minutes. Or if you see my life preserver inflate after this pint of beer, it's because I've got an ostomy.
That was one of my work meetings. I think when I went back to work, I think we had a team meeting, and I did just say, there's about 10 of us in the team, and most of them knew that it was straight back to work after my first surgery. So most of them knew what the surgery had been, but I think a lot of people don't really understand how it works, like the number of people who said, oh, is it a hole in your stomach? Nope. So they don't really get it, and they don't feel like they can ask questions because it's quite an intimate thing. And I'm like, no, ask what you want. Honestly, I did a talk in front of the I work for Transport for London, and I did a talk about IBD and stomas in front of the disability group, an awareness group, and literally spent 35 minutes on the talk and an hour and a half just answering questions afterwards, because people were just fascinated. And I was like, literally, there is no, I'm an open book. There's no question that's too personal. Go for your life. And so I think to be able to do that is a really big thing. I think it's really important, I think. But we went into this meeting at work anyway, sorry, digress there. And I said to the team, I was like, if you hear any noises, she whistles, she farts, and it's going to be me. And right on cue, it was like a kettle boiling, and she just went off. So now whenever she does it, everyone's just like, shut up, Rosie. So people just kind of talk to her, which made work so much easier.
I genuinely used to remember like you'd feel like that pressure build up, and you're like, oh, here it comes.
But then do you not put your hand on? If that happens to me and I'm in public, I'm like, oh, don't. I just like,
yeah. Well, like because I work as an exercise physiologist in rehab. One of the things I remember being at Headley and being into, like, this is when I had my ostomy, and sitting in some of the consultations where we have new patients arriving. And to be fair, even with the J pouch, it still happens now, like it gargles and bubbles away. In fact, pretty frequently on these shows, given the time of day them doing it, it's sometimes that's when it's most audible. But genuinely, I just remember being sat there going, oh no, here it comes again. I just got a point where I'd just be like, oh, excuse me. But there'd be some days, particularly whenever the lads would make an exceptionally strong coffee or something like that, where it would just become uber active.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy coffee, so I'm not going to stop. So it's just like, and you just be sat there looking at and the patients looking around going, oh my God.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, caffeine's a bit, isn't it? Caffeine is just, wow, it's like rocket fuel. It's just there for hours afterwards. But yeah, and like you say, not giving it up. Absolutely not.
So one of the other things that we talked about before is contraception as well. I'm just wondering, like, what's your thoughts on that in relation to sort of IBD, and what's your experience been with it?
To be honest, not much experience, because having been single for like pretty much over the entire period, not really been a massive issue. I think, again, I've spoken to other women who have been through certain things, because I used to take the pill for migraines. So that would always be my method of choice, just because I'm used to doing it. And actually, apparently that doesn't have any effect on anything. So you can still do that. Although I was offered the coil, but then with, again, that was going to be problematic, because with the uterus tilted back, it's much harder to get it in, and it's harder for it to stay in. So actually you're limited sometimes, if your organs do that, as to what you can use post-surgery. So I think, you have like a different way that your body reacts to those sort of things afterwards, and it's just purely to do with the structure of all the organs in your abdomen, because like my surgeon delightfully said, everything just like squishes into the space that you take out. So I don't think, as far as I know from people I've spoken to, there's not really been a huge deal of difference. You can still have the implant under the skin. I think it's only when it comes to contraception that you have to physically place in the uterus that it becomes a bit difficult. But again, only for some people. I know some people who use the coil and it works fine. But it's not been something I've had to experience. So that's an area I did some research in for a blog post, actually, which I'm doing soon. So it has been quite interesting.
I mean, that's, again, it's another school day for me, because we were having a chat about this in last week's episode. And one of the things that was mentioned was that the pill in itself, you need to be careful, because you may not absorb it as much as you might have had, because you have a reduced intestinal tract.
I think, okay, so that is definitely an issue for Crohn's patients, because you have a very different situation to colitis patients. So I still have my terminal ileum, which means that I can absorb anything, and I still have the possibility of absorbing anything. So I don't have problems with passing pills into my bag. A lot of people I know will take a pill and it will just appear whole. And that's more with Crohn's patients if you've got small bowel issues, because the terminal ileum is where you
Okay.
absorb everything. So if you still have that in place and you have an end ileostomy and your entire small bowel, which I do, then pills aren't a problem. So actually the contraceptive pill would be fine for me. So, but that's because I'm fine with any pills. But again, like I say, if you don't have that part of your small bowel, or if you have Crohn's because you have disease through the small bowel, it definitely affects absorption. So it can not be an option for people who are in that situation.
And again, I guess, even more reason whenever you're discussing these things to make sure you do discuss it with a doctor or someone who's within your IBD care team. Because again, like, you just highlighted another point is that, for someone with ulcerative and someone with Crohn's, or someone who's had slightly different surgery for whatever reason and maybe missing a certain part of their large or small intestine, it can have such a different impact on those kinds of things that, like, I don't know what your experience with your surgeon was like post operations and post care, whether that was just a natural conversation or whether
She
that's something you've had to inquire with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. When I look at forums and support groups and some of the things that people post around surgery, it frightens me the number of people who are hugely unaware of A, the surgery they're about to have, B, the consequences on what it could be afterwards, how it's going to affect their body. And actually people in some situations who don't even know what the surgery entails. I've seen a couple of people who are like, oh, so I'm having a subtotal colectomy, not really sure what's going to happen, and I'm like, this is stuff you need to be asking your doctor. You can't go into major surgery and not want to know what's going on in your body. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I wanted to know everything. So my surgeon was incredible. Like, is about like in the past tense. I had an all-female team pretty much for my first surgery, almost, which was quite nice. And my surgeon was one of these surgeons, because a lot of them are either very, very good in surgery and have a rubbish bedside manner, or the other way around, whereas I had the best of both. She was incredible. She was awesome in theatre, and then I had visits every single day beforehand, every single day afterwards. She had me signed over to her care. She didn't even let me have an IBD consultant afterwards. She was like, nope, I want to manage your care. So I had a direct line to her. I've had her for all of my follow-ups, and I've only just been signed off from her about a couple of months ago when I moved away from London. But she said, if you ever have to have planned elective surgery going forward, I can go back to her and have it done, because she knows obviously my history. She was amazing. She answered every question, even when I asked it 50 times. She would patiently just explain it. She really hammered home to me before my surgery about how it would affect fertility if I wanted a family, and if I'd had to be absolutely sure that I didn't want kids if we were going to go into certain aspects of surgery. So all of the risks and all of the sort of options were made very clear going into it. But I had a great medical team. I had an amazing team. So I think I was very lucky with that, because a lot of people don't. And some people will come out and ask questions in support group like this, like, can I take X, Y, and Z medication? Can I, will this affect my stoma? Will that affect my stoma? What? And I just kind of think, I'm kind of sad that nobody's told them, because it's not all down to them to be asking these questions, because it's stuff that they don't even know might potentially be a problem. So I just think when, your medical team aren't really open and really detailed with you, it's a bit of a letdown. But then I suppose that kind of is the thing that would push you to just take care of your own care and just ask those questions if you need them, because anything that's happening to your body, you need to be in control of. So yeah, I mean, again, that might be me. I'm very thorough in knowing what's going on with me. I like to know I was talked through the surgeries both times. So every step of the way, I've known exactly what's going on with my body. And I think that would have really panicked me if I didn't. It would have kicked off the anxiety if I didn't.
No, and I think you're right. I think it's very important to question the subject matter experts as opposed to subject matter opinion.
Yeah.
Which, and at least then there's recourse if the information is wrong, should it be, which is very unusual. And what you just mentioned there as well, like the aftercare process where the consultant was able to give you the warm and fuzzy that, in future, if you want to, and it's elective, you can come back onto my books. And I think that's one of the large benefits that we have and are privileged to have within our National Health Service. It's something only now that I'm starting to realize maybe more, but as I interact with people from wider afield. I don't think I've ever taken it for granted, but certainly people's experiences from America and further afield in Australia and things like that. It's been really interesting how different their approaches and how much more fluid their healthcare team might be, and how I've certainly had chats where people have had drastically different opinions from certain medical teams, and they've had to go around the houses to find the right medical team, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And lots of misdiagnosis, late diagnosis, long term, like waiting for ages for a diagnosis. I mean, I just was fobbed off so many times right at the very beginning of my journey that I had to demand to have a tube stuck up my bum. It's like, who asks for a colonoscopy? Who goes in there and goes, please, can I have one? And it just got to that point where I was like, if I don't take control of this, they're just going to send me off and I don't know what's going to happen. So, but I've got the sort of awareness of myself to know that something's not right. So other people will just trust a doctor and just go away and not question it. And that I find really frightening. It's just like, if I always say to people, you know your body, you know what's not right, listen to it. And if you don't think the doctors have given you the right answer, trust your gut, ironically. Go back and just keep pushing until you get answers, because that only you can do that. They're so busy, and it's not the GP's faults. They're run off their feet. They're very busy. And it's just, you have to just be aware and really push for what you need, because if something's not quite right.
And then the system is also aired to conservative, aired to the conservative option until the conservative option isn't an option.
Yeah.
And oh my God, but it sounds unfortunate. It sounds like a redundant process, but 9 times out of 10, it generally is one of the conservative diagnoses that would affirm. It's like, unless you're like a perfect storm, then it's very unlikely that they will just go, oh yes, no, it is stage 4 cancer. You know what I mean? Yeah. They'll go, oh well, it could be, and they'll go through a sequential number of.
Fine. I mean, I was actually bleeding for 3 straight weeks, and they kept telling me I had gastro. I was like, this is one of the major signs of bowel cancer, and you're not even putting a stool sample through or doing blood tests. So that just gobsmacking. I was like, seriously, constantly bleeding. It's not, and you just have to kind of, it's a balance of having someone who'll listen to you and then knowing when to push for what you want. So yeah, it's hard.
I mean, I had quite an interesting experience when I go back to when I ended up in hospital with that what ended up in having my bowel removed. Because I was obviously initially in the UK, then I traveled across to Germany for one of my postings, and I was there for 6, 7, 8 years ish. And then when I came back to the UK, I'd only been back in the UK less than a year, and because I'd been living outside the UK for so long, all my medical notes with the previous care had gone. They'd been archived or whatever. So like, whenever I reported ill and I knew what it was, I knew I was having a flare, and the doctor GP was like, right, we'll start you on a dose of steroids. It's fine. And I was like, look, this is a really bad flare. I think I need to go and see like the IBD specialist, or I need to go and see. And the consultant that I'd seen before, he'd retired, and then I had to go. It was like, I've got no option but to put you through a new application. So I was like, well, how long is that going to take? He said it's like, it could take 2 weeks, could take 2 months. And I was like, that's not fast enough. And what ended up happening, like, as every day, basically, we were increasing the steroid dose and then by the end of 3 weeks, I then just presented to the A&E, and they took one blood sample and admitted off the blood sample because the inflammation markers, and obviously I was able to tell them, and they could see in the history, and then it was like, right, you should have been in weeks ago.
It is. I think it's, the sad thing is, I think now it's a lot better. I think with social media and with a lot of the stories that have been in the news recently where younger people have been diagnosed with or had to have stomas. And I think the awareness now is much bigger. I think maybe a while back it wasn't quite as sort of notable as a thing. People used to kind of be like, oh yeah, a bit of IBD, and now it's like, oh, IBD, and it's actually now being recognized for the really serious condition that it is, more, I think, than it has been in the past. So I mean, that can only be a good thing, but it's yeah, like you say, when you're in the middle of a really horrible flare that you know is horrible, it's like these steroids are not going to do anything. So yeah,
These
yeah,
steroids aren't staying in long enough to do anything.
right, exactly. It's like, I'm sorry, what steroids? But yeah, it's horrendous.
And again, I know, and I'm going through that process as well. You know, you're in a highly emotional state, and you can see things maybe less. You have less perspective, I guess, or more tunnel vision.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you're
so
scared,
yeah,
it's like, well, it's frightening. It's hot, like that happening to you, that physical thing happening is scary. It's really scary. So, you rely on these people to look after you and make you better. And it's, if they're not doing it, it's like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I think the presence that's been going on like over the social media and the news recently, I think has been, in some cases, it's been pretty tragic. Like with the guy who unfortunately died. But I think in other ways, like, do you follow Kid with a Bag?
yeah. I've recently started following him.
I mean, he's so young, and it's like, you know what, he's smashing it. He's doing such a good job for advocacy for young stoma owners, because it isn't just old people who have stomas, and I think that's another massive myth that people are starting to realize now. And I think now it's out there and it's very in your face, and it's less taboo. People talk about it more. It's just becoming, it means that people in future generations are going to get much better treatment and quicker treatment, hopefully.
Yeah, I wonder. I always wonder with things like that, particularly when it's involving people who are young or exceptionally young, and is like where the tipping point is of where it's refreshing to see it, and it's putting it in a position where it's going to encourage people to feel more confident or encourage people to understand better,
Yeah.
or where and where the tipping point is it where it becomes that people then opt for and push for without the need for. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I know what you mean. I don't know. I think from my perspective, I've spoken to quite a few people who have been on sort of biologics for years, regular infusions, taking other
Mm,
medications for other associated illnesses, basically, just slowly pounding their body with medication, and yet still having flares and still, being in pain and all this kind of thing. And it's not quite as simple with Crohn's, as you well know,
mm,
because obviously of the area of your body that's affected. But with colitis, if it's just colitis, it sounds like an extreme thing to do, but I would rather have a stoma and not have all that than go through a whole lifetime of being on drugs. And I've spoken to a couple of people who have then, since speaking with me and other people, obviously their medical team, they don't do it based on what I say, but have actually requested the stoma surgery because they're just fed up of like constant infusions which drain you in themselves. Constant things like B12s, iron things, electrolyte imbalances, being admitted with flares, being on steroids, which are great drugs, but also horrible, horrible drugs to take.
mhm.
And they affect you in themselves. So you've got the side effects of all of these drugs, as well as dealing with your actual IBD. And I just think, to save years of pain, just get it done. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a stoma. It's not a small decision. But honestly, afterwards, you can't ever get across to somebody how much better it can make things. So it like you say, there is a tipping point and there is a balance. And you'd like to think that doctors and surgeons wouldn't allow unnecessary stoma surgery. I mean, a lot of them, to be honest, fall down on the side of the last resort thing, which I hate.
Mhm.
They will literally make you go until your bowel is going to give up and then go, oh, okay, we'll take it out then. So I think that's dangerous personally, because I think by that point, there's often a lot of irreparable damage that's done outside of your bowel. And I just think if you intervene a little bit earlier, maybe you could kind of stop those things. But again, patient to patient. But I just don't like this whole, we're not going to take it out until it's literally going to kill you kind of
Yeah, and
attitude.
I guess that's the big equation as well, is like none of the medication that is um, allowed for IBD is a simple medication. None of it is just a direct, oh, this just deals with this. It all comes with a lot of side effects, a lot
Yeah,
of further or deeper risks to your own health, be that liver or kidneys, or be that, osteoarthritis,
yeah,
or worse. um and I guess when you take those things into consideration, the longer then you're taking that strain of medication or collection of medication, the more susceptible you probably are. Like even just something as simple as topical steroids,
Yeah.
you know, the long-term impacts on the body of that are drastic, to say the least. You know, if you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 30 years worth of regular steroid use. So I guess in a way, you are saving, it does save you a lot of tax on your body.
It also saves the NHS money. Years and years of these drugs are not cheap. You know, I would have thought it would be a benefit to them, if anything. And I mean, just as an example of how steroids can affect you, I was literally, and this is ridiculous, I was on rectal enemas, steroid enemas for the year between my stoma surgery and my Barbie butt surgery. Those are internal topical steroids. It's one puff of foam up your bum every night. And even that, after a year, started to give me effects like hair thinning. I got my moon phase back towards the end. And that's just, you know, so if you're taking heavy duty pills or having, you know, that's a whole other world. And I was very lucky because from obviously diagnosis to stoma was only a year. So I didn't have all these associated illnesses. So my life has kind of pretty much gone back to like what it was. I just have a bag. But I know lots of people who are not that lucky and just put their body through years of this stuff because they're terrified of a stoma, and they will, you know, they just do anything to not have one without realizing actually how beneficial it can be afterwards, rather than putting your body through all this. So
I didn't realize that steroids did hair thinning. I knew all about the muscular tendon and ligaments and joints and things like that. I didn't realize it did hair thinning. It
yeah.
explains a lot. But thankfully, I had quite a lot of thick hair.
Yeah, it did. Luckily, it didn't fall out in patches, which is nice. But
Yeah.
it definitely thinned a lot. It's gone back. It's going back. I mean, and it does, but it definitely did that. I mean, it doesn't for everyone. I think that's the other thing, isn't it? Steroids have different side effects for different people. So yeah, but they're bad boy drugs. You know, they're pretty hardcore. So especially the doses that we take for IBD, they're pretty hefty.
So we're going to get into some deep and personal questions now. We're gonna dig into that mind because it hasn't fatigued enough already tonight. So the next question is, what would you say to your 10-year-old self?
Don't have a perm. I don't know. Do you know what? Actually, I've been asked this a lot, and not necessarily 10-year-old self, but just pre IBD self. I'd probably say, if you're going with 10-year-old, stop worrying so much about what other people think. Do more exercise. That would be one. But for a 10-year-old, I'd just be like, you know what, relax. Stop worrying so much about what other people think, because I always have done. And just enjoy life, because you're living in Saudi Arabia. Make the most of it. So yeah, I think I just chill, because I'm the oldest of 4 as well. So, you know, that comes with its own sort of, not pressures, but, you know, being the oldest sibling of 4 is, you know, it's responsibility of a certain level. So yeah, I think it would just be, just enjoy things a bit more. I mean, if you're kind of older self, then I think there are times, I won't lie, when I wonder if my lifestyle led to this. So I don't know. I think I'd probably tell different things to different stages of my life, to be honest.
And why wouldn't you? So next one is, what gets you through difficult days?
Luckily they are few and far between, but definitely my faith, definitely my family, definitely my friends, and more recently, my boyfriend. So I think it's people. It's always people. Always.
No, that's really cool. And I think it chimes back to what we were talking about earlier, and having that support network around you, and choosing the people that you want to be around as opposed to anything else. So we reached a part of a show that I call the 3 truths. And so I don't know how many episodes you've seen, but this is where we get some really deep thinking going on. So essentially, I've rubbed it off a guy called Lewis Howes, who has a very good business podcast. And what it is, it's many years from now. Your time on Earth is ending, and everything you've ever done, everything you ever created, disappears, and no one can have access to it. So you've now got the opportunity to leave 3 truths or 3 life lessons that you think that the world should take.
Wow.
So what are your 3 truths that you would leave the world with?
Wow, that's hard. Always be yourself. Don't I think that's probably the top one. Just be you, do you, don't shape yourself around what somebody else wants. Don't eat peas because they're minging. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. And I think for me, I don't know. I think just, again, because of the faith side of things, it's just, don't try and do everything on your own. I think, you're not meant to be an island. You're meant to have support. You're meant to have people. You're meant to have a system. Like, so don't do everything by yourself. Like, it's okay to ask for help, and that kind of makes you stronger, I think, than just kind of muddling through something on your own. So those would be mine.
I think they're beautiful. Being you is very important, and I think a lot of us actually probably struggle to actually be that in a lot of times. I sometimes think that certainly in my younger years, I almost had a different mask for every occasion. Be it being a PTI, be it being within a squadron, be it being a corporal or a section commander, or be it being a boyfriend or a dad. It's almost like I would take one head off. There we go, that head on. And to a point where I think in my early 30s, I did have a sort of like, well, who am I? But peas though, like what's with the peas? What's that about?
There are a lot of foods that I will eat out of politeness that I don't really like. Peas are not one of them. Literally the only thing I will push off a plate. And people think I'm weird because they don't taste of anything. I was like, but if you don't like them, they really, really do. So yeah, it's just one of my things.
I thought it was going to be just because it comes out the same way it goes in.
Oh yeah, they do that too. I did accidentally eat one once in some rice from a Chinese takeaway that snuck in there, and that thing just fired out the next day. I mean, honestly, the stuff that comes out, I just love this stuff because it's not really poo anymore. I just find it fascinating what comes out the other end. Yeah. Like, you can literally see what you've eaten. I mean, I've had some scary bags after beetroot and red velvet cake. Thought I was bleeding. Not fun.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I find the whole thing fascinating, really. I think I've learned so much from all of my ostomate buddies, and I've met so many of like you wonderful people anyway through all of this, that it's just been the best educational, emotional roller coaster ever. And it's just helping me get through the day to day. It's helping me survive. It's helping other people survive. So I think the family, the community it's just invaluable. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, no, we have got a very unique community, and I think that's one of the best things that I've certainly found through having IBD. Talking about beetroot, I do remember a very bad incident. Well, not a bad incident. I do remember a certain incident with beetroot and a later stop at like a Liquid and Envy nightclub, and it was like a blacklit toilet, and I was like. Oh my! What is it? And then you could not tell the difference. I literally had to go outside and find some white light, and then it was like about 5 minutes later, after like sheer panic, remembered. Oh, you had beetroot salad.
That was my it was about. I'm not even joking. It was probably about 4 weeks after stoma surgery, and it was the first thing I'd gone out to eat, and came back, and obviously 4 to 6 hour transit time. So in the evening, I emptied my bag, and it was screaming red, and it was that heart-stopping, sweating, like, and we were all just getting ready to go back to the hospital. Mum was like, right, get the bag, get out the door, and then she stopped me and went, you had red velvet cake at lunchtime. And there's the relief. It's just like, oh yeah, so I did. But yeah, you're never gonna stop with the scary moments. They're always gonna happen.
No, it's so scary. I'd just like to take a minute to actually just appreciate yourself, Eleanor, just to say thank you so much for coming on to the show, and everything that you do within the community itself. I followed your page for quite a significant amount of time now, and it's just like I just love seeing the positivity on there, seeing the cats, and obviously the recent news of having a new boyfriend. But yeah, it's just, you're such a lovely person. You have such a warm and enthusiastic character that it's just lovely to be around you and chat to you. And, we've had numbers of group chats via Zoom and things like that. And it's always been a pleasure just to meet you and see what's going on. So just thank you so much for coming on.
Well, welcome. It's been great.
Okay, guys, so that's coming to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you've got any questions, just keep putting them into the comments and I'll get back to you through tonight and through the next week or so. But we'll be back again next week with another live show. We're going to be sticking with our women's health topic and we'll see you again after. Bye for now.